Thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif, an urban planner, and you're more than welcome to join my big journey of exploring the making of smarter and more livable cities. Please don't forget to follow Urbanistica on the different social media platforms, and also let's connect on LinkedIn. Big thanks to Urbanistica podcast partner AFRY. AFRY is an international engineering and design company providing sustainable solutions in the fields of energy, industry, and infrastructure. Are you ready for a new episode? Let's go for it.
We have a new episode. We have great storytellers. I have the pleasure to welcome Julia, Lukas, and Martin to Urbanistica podcast. Hey, and welcome.
Hello, thank you very much.
Hey, thank you. Really nice of being here.
Yeah, I'm really happy to see you and to talk to you. Gonna be a really interesting episode. We can start with you, Lukas. You're one of our storytellers. How would you like to introduce yourself and tell us about your passion?
Hi, my name is Lukas. Currently doing my master's in architecture at KTH University in Stockholm. And I'm really passionate about architecture and also engineering, scientific approach, researching. And that's it.
Welcome. Julia, how are you doing?
I'm good. I have studied all my years, like 4 years at KTH. And I'm really passionate about sustainability and designing and finding new creative solutions for things.
That's amazing. How are you, Martin?
I'm good, thank you.
Give us a highlight about you, about your passion.
So I'm also an architect on my fourth year here at KTH. So I'm from Sweden and born and raised in Stockholm, and I have a background in economics. So I would say my passion is often about finding maybe that intersection between architecture and economics. And I think that's a very interesting subject in many cases.
Yeah, exactly. And also super important because almost in the end, it's all about the money, how much is your budget and what you can do with it. So I'm really happy to have you here. Let's start with you, Lukas. Your group were divided into groups within different focus areas. So what has been your focus?
Our focus area was climate change and the effects climate change have or will have on Stockholm. And we basically started with gathering a lot of research material for this and trying to really pick out these different aspects, what might endanger Stockholm. And to go a bit more further into that is that we really try to assess what are the different risks, what are different areas. We studied the flooding effects, especially in depth, and looked at different risk areas, cultural values, social values, and where buildings might get underwater, and found a lot of different interesting stuff.
Yeah. Do you have the entire Stockholm as a focus area or a part of Stockholm?
We looked at we looked even outside of Stockholm for the different flooding scenarios, but mostly focused our efforts on Stockholm itself and the center part of Stockholm, because that's where most of the project sites would be.
Yeah. And Julia, I know that your group started doing a map analysis. So what did you discover there?
Just areas in risk of getting in damage because of climate change, areas in risk of erosion and rising sea levels, both due to more rain in Mälaren, rising sea levels in Mälaren, but also more the general perspective of sea levels in the world.
And when you do the analysis, until how far you go with the 20 to 2050, or you just do the nowadays analysis?
We have looked into a more further perspective and try to look at it in more 100-year perspective or so.
Yeah. And looking back historically, how was the relationship between human practices and the landscape in relation to your topic?
we could really see that we are always trying to control the landscape, like trying to benefit it for ourselves. And for example, we have looked more closely into Slussen, the lock in Stockholm, and see that from the beginning, we always wanted to control it to make it easier for ourselves. But then it can in some way be like problematic also when we want to change so much that we're changing the whole climate.
And if you compare it with today, like what insight does it give? Are we still doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are do it even more today, because we are like always trying to control it, and we are affecting the climate so much today. So that is something really we have to think about in how can we control it in a sustainable way in the future.
Exactly. And talking about the future, Martin, like how do you imagine the future, and why do you imagine it like this?
Well, we started off in our first project in the group with looking at the consequences of sea level rise in Stockholm. And what we discovered is that the damages in Stockholm only will be enormous. Like it's hard to get a grip on how big the damages will be. Just in terms of the economics, the damages will be enormous, and it's hard to put a number or a digit on that. But also the ecological systems caused by erosion, for example, is another enormous problem. So we looked at this first, and one solution to the rising sea levels is to actually control the sea levels. And on a local level here in Stockholm, that would probably be best to do that in the Bachsholm area, in the outer archipelago. So that was the first analysis we did in the first group work that we did together. So for my own project, after that, I took it to an even bigger or larger context. So I zoomed out and I looked at the whole Baltic Sea region, because climate change and rising sea levels, that's not a local problem. That's a global problem or a regional problem in many ways. So I try to find a way to control the sea level on a more regional level than a local level. So I find that there are some narrow choking points from the sea, from the Atlantic into the Baltic Ocean or the Baltic Sea. And if we just control the water level there, maybe we could stop the flooding of the entire Baltic Sea region rather than just controlling it in local areas such as Stockholm or such as St. Petersburg or such as Copenhagen. There are all these different individual projects or problems that need to be addressed. But if you could address it together between countries, it could be a much more effective way to address the problem.
Yeah, so like acting more on the national levels between the different countries.
Yeah, exactly. And as I touched upon a little bit before, these are, in order to control the sea level or to control against rising sea levels locally, it's enormous investments that needs to be done in order to make that happen. And if we just could coordinate these actions, we could save a lot of money.
I can imagine. So tell us more about, like, let's talk design. Tell us more about your design proposal.
As I said, these are enormous projects, and basically what you want to do is to build artificial islands in order to stop the water from getting from the Atlantic into the Baltic Sea. And while you're doing that, also with an economic background, it's much more efficient to build big islands that you then can inhabit and to build cities or housing on. So my proposal for this Baltic Sea floodlock, as I'm calling it, is to build a series of artificial islands across Öresund, from Helsingborg to Helsingör, and then over the Stora Belt and the Lilla Belt in Denmark. And the one with on the Öresund will be a city up on the artificial island.
Yeah, how big are we talking about? How big is these islands?
Well, these islands are really big. So the one that I'm proposing is about 5 square kilometers big. And that might sound really big when you first hear the number. And yes, it is, of course, very big. But if you compare it to like other equivalent projects across the world, it's actually not that big. We're seeing a lot of similar projects in order to save entire cities or regions from flooding, just as this one. So yeah, it's a huge project, but if you compare the investment to the damages it could cause otherwise, I think it's actually not that large scale as it might seem at the first sight.
Yeah, I got your point. Really interesting. And moving to you, Lukas. So tell us more about your design proposal.
Yeah, my design proposal is actually connected to the project we did as a group together. So the way this course was structured was that we were working together first as a group climate change, first exploring and researching, and then creating a design proposal together for a specific area. And it rotated around Hammarby Sluss, a lock in Stockholm, and the adjacent water areas. And we created a project called the Yellow Ribbon. And this Yellow Ribbon is basically a proposal to really connect different green areas and to create this environmental connections between different areas, but also create social connections and a walkway and have different functionalities there. And as an individual project, I extended this and really looked at how to create and connect different kinds of habitats for fish, amphibians, and basically I created in the situation at Hammarby Sluss is like a canal, and it has very hard edges, which is environmentally not the best for fish and underwater marine life. So to soften up these hard edges, what I proposed is to create something like a pocket parks. And in these pocket parks, they're going to be filled up with this excavated rock, partially from this underground, to create soft edges to the water. And to still allow for the ships to dock outside these pockets. There's possibility for the ships to dock, but inside you have these soft edges. And additionally, on top of that, I also proposed floating islands, small square floating islands, which can be connected to each other. It's a modular design, so you can build it up in different ways. And so you would have something like park spaces on top of the water. And in the center of that, you would have seaweed and mussel farms, which would basically add another layer to all of this. For one, they create habitats underwater, but they also clean the water. And then also, because it's a farm, you would in this area alone, it's approximately 1 to 2 hectares of underwater farmland. And these would be basically producing for the local surroundings, for the restaurants, for small marketplaces, and so on, to create this social aspect, this social layer, and intervene basically as much as possible and create closed systems, basically.
Yeah, it's like super creative. I'm looking forward to see like the poster, the like how you plan it and so on. And I'm wondering, like, all the pocket parks and the other like areas that you suggested, are they open for the people as well, like the pocket parks?
Yes, that's the idea. Like, so it's basically these pockets. Pocket parks are kind of like, you could climb over to the rocks and like be there, but it's those are it's in these pocket parks where you have these floating islands where this is really for the social aspect where the people could go down and hang out and have a good time and relax. So it's basically creating recreational area in a place where there's not too much compared to other parts of Stockholm. And really taking back this waterfront to the people and creating this connection to the waterfront, which existed once, but really got lost over time. People in Stockholm have kind of lost this connection to the water, because mostly it's now used for ships to dock. And it's quite similar if you look how we are treating the streets and cars, like over history. In our urban fabric, it's like the streets have been in the 50s and 60s completely redesigned to only have one purpose, to serve cars. And then we realized our mistakes and started to rethink our streets slowly around the globe and create alternative street designs. For example, there's examples where we have, instead of straight roads where cars could rush through fast, it would be a winding road with small pocket parks, small green areas to really increase the value and overall environment. So it's basically a similar approach, but to the waterway and to this canal situation.
Yeah, this is really like a creative way of thinking. Like I'm doing the same project actually now in Helsingborg, and we introducing this parklet, like the kind of you bring back the street, you give back the street to people and the nature instead of cars. So I like the approach. And Julia, so tell us about your design proposal.
I think my design proposal have a lot in common with Lukas, because we are also working at this connection to the water and really trying to create new sustainable areas for both humans and animals. So we have worked along at Riddarfjärden and close to Stadshuset, like the city hall. So really like in central Stockholm, really to also bring the awareness of these issues with both like the climate change and other things like the habitat loss and so on, and the pollution in Stockholm. And we have created like a walkway around it, and with floating bridges and these kind of things that you want to come really close to it, but also really shallow waters and piers close to that to create good habitats for the perch and other fishes. And in relation to that, we have created a lot of activities such as like restaurants and cafes, but also like canoeing rentals to create like the people want to be there, not that they have to.
Was it easy to design like the life below the water and then the above, like mixing the both?
There have been an issue with, absolutely, but I think like a struggle with it, but at the same time it was like easier than I thought, because we have so much in common. Like we can do good sustainable solutions for both humans and find like both humans and most habitats, like green structures that works together so well. It's not a problem to create like, they don't have to be in relation to each other as like opposites. They can be like joined together and find, and I think that is something we're like focused on, to find this joint solution for it.
Exactly, like they can coexist.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think this is like, as architects, this is our mission, to put them together instead of like having them separated. So Julia, like how has this course affected you, and what is the biggest lesson that you learned?
I think a lot of things is like this joint connection between it, but also like the bigger picture of it, that if we are like in this semester, we have the possibility to see and work with this different disciplinarities and have a lot of experts joining our class, and that have been so give much value of it. But because when we And that is a lot of like the role of architecture in general, that we have this opportunity to collect different like experts and to have create a deeper understanding of these issues, and really like working together then is the way when you find best solutions.
Exactly. And Martin, so how about you? Like, how has this course affected you, and like, what is the biggest lesson that you learned?
I think that this course has let us work with problems that we are not very used to address in this discipline. So yeah, I think it's been very interesting to just look at a bigger scale, and with the climate change that we have been focusing on, it's such a big problem and hard to grasp the consequences of it. So yeah, it's hard to just it's nice to just dip your toes in that subject and see what we can do on a bigger scale as architects.
Yes, Lukas.
Yeah, to say a project like this and a studio project like this has been on my wish list for quite some time now. And it's actually like this working methodology of designing by research and being really coming out of the science of the analysis and all this data and so on has been on my wish list for a long time. And this is like kind of a bit of a dream come true. And it's also one of the reasons why I came to KTH, a technical and scientific university. And I had projects where I tried to have this approach on my own, but it wasn't coming from the studio and the professors, but to really have all this input coming from the professors, bringing in all these different experts, like Julia said, from these different disciplines, it gave such valuable lessons, even though I knew it theoretically. To have this practical hands-on and to really experience it was really rewarding. And yeah, I learned quite a lot through that.
That's amazing. That's really interesting to hear. And I would love that we take the last question to finish this great episode. And it's about each one of you giving the listener one takeaway message. So we start with you, Julia. What is your takeaway message to the listener?
I be curious. Always try to explore more things, understand the whole picture. Like, try to really find that curiosity and never stop learning new things.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. Martin, what is your takeaway message?
My very short message to everyone else should be to think big, I think.
Yeah. And Lukas?
Yeah. When you approach a project or something like this, or basically anything, any situation, before trying to having an opinion about it, try to completely understand it with an unbiased way and try to absorb all the information, all the different aspects, because most things that look simple and are like, most people just get rushed to opinions, but first try to absorb all of it, and then like really after understanding a problem or a situation, then try to project your opinions and ideas. Mostly the problems tell you the answers by themselves.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, I'm really happy to talk to you. Thank you so much for giving your time to record this episode.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. You learned something new and also got inspired by the guest. Don't forget to share the episode on your social media and recommend it to people you think they are really interested in this topic. Thank you so much again for giving your valuable time to Urbanistica podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif. Keep up the good work. Keep loving cities.